Yo guys, I hope you're all good and welcome back to another episode of Duncan Shows You. As you can see, I'm joined again by the Sausalito E2. I had this bike out on the streets and the roads a couple of weeks back. It's been getting a fair bit of action, as you can see. It's a little bit dirty, so we're going to use this as an opportunity to show you guys some tips, give your bike some care and a bit of love to help it run smoother for longer. Now we're pretty lucky in that the guys at Muc-Off keep us stocked up with a pretty extensive range of products for giving our bike care and cleaning it up, but we're also going to show you that you don't necessarily need every single thing, and there's a few things you might even find in your house that can help you give your bike the clean and the care that it needs. So the first thing we're going to tackle, as it's the dirtiest, grimiest and greasiest part, is the chain and the drivetrain, and we're going to do this using some chain cleaner, which is water soluble, so you don't need to worry about it too much getting this, even though it's probably worth keeping it out of the way if you can. And we're basically going to spray that all over the chain and drivetrain and leave that to soak. And what that'll basically do is get to work and sort of breaking down and helping the sort of salt and grease and rust just sort of come away from the chain. So we've left the chain cleaner on the chain for a few minutes to work its magic. It's sort of degreasing the chain, sort of eating away and working away at the sort of grit and salt that you might have got off on the road. I've got a specific brush, but you could also use some things you might find in your house, such as a toothbrush, preferably one that you're not going to use again. Just agitate the dirt. So now we've got the chain cleaner on the chain and drivetrain working its magic and sort of taking that grease off. We're now going to look at giving this thing a sort of rinse all over. I've got the pressure washer, which helps a little bit, but if you don't have a pressure washer, you can also use a typical hose, or you can even use a watering can or a bucket of water if you don't even have a hose. So now the bike's rinsed down, we're now going to look at using the Nanotech bike cleaner, and basically that can be used all over the bike, and what that'll do is sort of break the grit down and pull it away from the surface, ready to be sprayed off in the rinsing process that we'll get to shortly. So we've left the Nanotech cleaner to work its magic on the bike, eating away at that grit and grime. We're now going to just sort of agitate some of the stubborn points of the frame and any other parts with some stubborn dirt to help get rid of it. I pretty much got the whole bike with a sponge. If you do have any harder to reach parts, you can use some of the tailor-made brushes you get from the likes of Muc-Off, and that'll just help get the dirt and grime out of the harder to reach pieces. So now you've agitated the dirt with the nano cleaner and your sponges and your brushes. It's now time to rinse it off with your hose. Obviously if you don't have that, you can just use a watering can or a bucket of water. So you've got your bike looking pretty clean, and it could be pretty tempting at this point just to leave it there. But this is potentially the most important part, where we're going to actually take this clean bike, and it's a little bit labour intensive, but we're actually going to dry it, and then we're going to look at doing some little bits and bobs to it that's going to help preserve the life of your bike and keep it running smoother for longer. So we've taken refuge from the rain, which is obviously pretty important, because we're now going to use the microfiber cloth to dry basically the whole of the bike, starting off with the frame. Now I've got my finest old sock to tackle the chain. You want to pretty much keep the stuff you use on your chain and the rest of the bike separate, just because there's so much grease and contaminants on it. So I'm just going to use this to basically dry it. We've dried the frame and most of the bike with the dry microfiber. We tackled the chain and dried that with an old sock. Now we've got almost all the water off. We're going to use a product called MO94. This part isn't necessarily crucial, but what it does do is basically it helps just get those last little bits of water and displaces water. So I would tend to spray this on things like the cassette, chain, as well as little bits like bolts and seals for motors and batteries and stuff like that. It just helps displace the water a little bit and keeps the water away from those vital parts in your bike. So now you've got your chain and drivetrain clean and dry, I'm going to look at lube, which is potentially the most important part of keeping your bike running smooth. On e-bikes it's even more important because of the extra torque. Everything just gets a lot more stress with it, so your chain ring, your cassette and your derailleur are just going to take a bigger beating than they would in a regular bike. You've got wet weather lube and you've got dry weather lube. Pretty straightforward as it sounds. If you're expecting dry conditions, you use your dry lube, and if you're expecting wet conditions, you use wet lube. And if you're somewhere like myself in Wales in March, you're probably expecting a bit of both. And if you're not sure, I tend to opt with wet weather lube. So you apply this in the inside of the chain, and that basically helps it work around throughout the whole of the drivetrain. On an e-bike, you don't have the benefit of basically turning your pedals around, which would subsequently move your whole chain around in a regular bike. So it's a little bit harder. What I would do is put it up on the stand and I would just tackle it bit by bit on the inside. So we've got the chain lubed with the relevant lube for the conditions that we're expecting. I'm now going to look at putting some protection on the bike. We're going to use this Bike Protect to spray on the bike, and what that's going to do is give it a bit of a protective shield that's going to protect it from the elements when you're out in your next ride. Some people would basically spray this like all over the bike directly onto it. Again, as a trials rider, and I'm absolutely paranoid about my brakes, so I'm typically going to spray this onto the microfiber and then apply it onto the frame from there, just to try and limit the contaminants getting on that disc brake. So the last step of this process, I like to look at the disc brakes. I leave that last because basically, if you did get any sort of crossfire of some of the stuff that you've been using beforehand, cleaning the bike, we can now get that off before we contaminate the pads, which is obviously a lot harder to get off than when it's just on the rotors. Cleaning the disc brakes will also get off any contaminants you may have picked up on your ride as well. So I'm going to take the disc brake cleaner and basically spray it on the rotors here, both sides. For cleaning the disc brakes, I tend to use a paper towel because it's pretty much the safest way of knowing that you're not going to get any contaminants. So say if you've been using a cloth and then the other parts of the bike, they might have grease in it, you might end up making your disc worse. So you're going to basically use a clean paper towel or a clean cloth and basically wipe those off, wipe them down. So we've run through how to clean and maintain your bike here to help it run smoother for longer. Because it's an e-bike though, there's definitely a few questions around how sort of sealed the whole sort of motor and battery system is, and just generally how it differs from a regular bike. So I'm actually going to jump on a call with Marin, who is one of the head designers at Marin. This is his sort of brainchild, he's the brains behind this bike, and I'm going to ask him a few questions about what extra care we need to take when dealing with an e-bike. One of the questions that we've been having regarding sort of the elements and stuff getting into the motor, whether that's the battery or the actual motor system itself, what's your sort of go-to advice for that in terms of keeping those, say, connections good, keeping water out of the electronics and stuff?
Yeah, so the systems that we use for Marin, high quality systems that are made to be out in the elements. So it's not a problem to leave your e-bike outside, if you're locking it up, or if it needs to be stored outside of your house. It's not an issue at all to leave it outside, and even if it's in the elements. Everything's waterproof. The motor can be even submerged in water. It's not the type of thing, you shouldn't be riding with the motor submerged for long periods of time, but the way that the bikes are made and the way that the high quality connections that we use are made, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Basically, the same kind of care and maintenance you would want to take with a traditional bicycle, you can transfer the same thing over. And that also goes for cleaning the bike. You don't have to worry too much if you're using a hose on it. If you want to, scrub it, you can take the battery out. The battery itself is also encased in a waterproof case, so you take the battery out. You can clean underneath that. You can clean around the motor. You can spray it, with water and any kind of traditional dish soaps or the professional bike cleaning stuff. Like all of that is no problem at all.
So thanks to Marin for that little snippet of information. It was pretty interesting to hear from him. The guys at Muc-Off have kindly given us a discount code. So if you want to get anything from those guys, head over to the website and use the code MARIN20 for 20% off your order. If you do have any questions about the bike or anything we've talked about today, please comment below and either myself or someone from the Marin Bikes team will be happy to help. We would also love to hear your comments and suggestions for content ideas. So again, please comment below and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you as always for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next time.